Welcome to Futures Hub, the podcast that ignites curiosity and navigates the pathways to tomorrow. I'm Mia, your guide on this journey into the future, where we explore the art of foresight, community co-creation, and personal growth. In each episode, we dive deep into innovative techniques to unlock the potential to shape our individual capacities and contribute to vibrant, inclusive communities. Join us as we mine the rich landscape of foresight, community empowerment, and building bridges between diverse voices. Whether you're a seasoned futurist or just dipping your toes into the world of foresight, this is the space where we soften the impact of future shock and craft a future that's both dynamic and inclusive. Let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to Futures Hub. Welcome back to Futures Hub. I'm Mia, your guide into the world of foresight, community co-creation, and imagining better futures. This episode marks our final episode for this season. As a bit of context, we initially launched the Futures Hub earlier this year and have been releasing one episode a month since June. This has resulted in a total of 6 episodes so far, and as we approach the end of the year, it gives us an opportunity to wrap up and reflect on this past season, take away some key insights, and take the opportunity to prepare for the next season of a great series of episodes and guests to come. Before we dive into this episode, which will be our season wrap-up, I challenge you to ask yourself, what kind of future are you creating? Each choice we make today is shaping the world of tomorrow. Over the past 6 episodes, we've had the honor of hearing from some truly inspiring guests. This includes changemakers that work at the intersections of climate justice, peace building, and decolonized design, to those who are rethinking norms from nonprofit leadership to community engagement. These guests have shown us a glimpse into what different futures could potentially look like, and it is with great gratitude that I would like to express my thanks to each one of these guests again. In this final episode, we'll go through 4 key themes that we've uncovered throughout this season. These themes are 1, that foresight is a tool for creative transformation. 2, that futures work can and should be deeply personal. 3, that community is a cornerstone of effective futures work, including meaningful engagement. And finally, 4, that it's time to rethink the conventional. There are better ways of doing things. We just need to imagine it and then go out and do it. As we go through this final episode, we invite you to consider your role as a listener in all of this. Once again, think about what kind of futures you are co-creating. Starting with our first key takeaway or theme uncovered throughout this season, it is that foresight is a tool for creative transformation. Whether you're new to foresight or you're an experienced futurist, throughout this season, I hope that one of the things you've taken away is that there is power in foresight as a transformative tool. Whether in strategic design, nonprofit leadership, or personal growth, we've seen through these past 6 episodes how futures thinking enables us to not only envision new possibilities, but actively shape them. Not only that, but it's a strategic planning tool and approach that allows us to tap into those truly creative aspects of ourselves that are often forgotten in day-to-day business. Nataljia Vojno of Our Futures First in episode 2, for example, spoke of the need for embodied practices in futures thinking in order to get out of our heads and find our way into our hearts. It's a type of futures practice and practice in general that I am personally getting accustomed to and trying to learn how to be comfortable with, but there's true value in exploring new ways of thinking and being and growing. In the meantime, Alicia Richins, founder of The Climate Verse, shared insights on climate justice in episode 3, in particular bringing a different dimension of our understanding of futures through her project, The Climate Verse, which uses speculative storytelling to imagine parallel dimensions where climate crises are solved through equitable, sustainable solutions. Things such as alternate realities, other timelines, speculative storytelling, and science fiction are often associated with creative endeavors that aren't necessarily anchored in strategic planning, but there is a way to bring those things together for truly strategic future practices. Alicia Richins and Jenn from episode 6 of the Department of Imaginary Affairs remind us that creative tools such as artifacts from the future help us emotionally connect with possible futures and can galvanize us towards action. It's hard to think of the future when it seems so remote and distant, but creative foresight tools really allow us to explore what it would be like to live in those different futures. These types of artifacts help us ask, what does it take for us, or what will it take for us to get there? And how can we start now? Our conversations with our guests remind us that actions are not just distant goals. Our futures that we want to work towards aren't just something that happens in the distant, long term future. It's something that we must design collectively with everyone involved, including past, present, and future generations. Grace Guadarrama, a strategic foresight practitioner based out of Mexico, highlighted the importance of storytelling as well in episode 4. She reinforced that storytelling is not just a tool, but it's a bridge. Grace reminded us that stories help us connect emotionally to the futures we want to build, making them feel not just possible, but real. Foresight isn't just about analyzing trends, it's about being imaginative enough to be able to see what those futures are so we could act towards them. Similarly, Sabrina Meherally, founder of Pause and Effect, showed us in episode 5 that foresight, again, isn't just about predicting trends. It's about dismantling systems of oppression by reimagining institutions like design and research. Sabrina asked the powerful question of whose futures are being centered. It's a question we should continue asking ourselves as we look ahead and create space for relational, inclusive futures. Jenn dropped the mic with the idea that imagination is an intersection of care and grief. These concepts, these creative and new ways of thinking about the future, is just the tip of the iceberg to the positive work that we can all do when we start to think about the future and the futures available to us. In some way, shape, or form, each of our guests this season reminded us that visioning is an act of imagination. This season of Futures Hub ultimately reminded us that foresight is strongest when it's inclusive and participatory. Foresight's a powerful method to envision these futures, that there's a need to continue decolonizing futures work and question whose voices are amplified, and that storytelling and speculation can be part of the transformative nature of futures thinking among all of those other creative tools. Ultimately, we can bring that childlike wonder, that fun, playful side of us into this very important work. The second key underlying theme from this season is that futures work can be deeply personal in nature. And not just that it can be deeply personal in nature, but it should be deeply personal in nature. We're talking about the futures that all of us can live. Our loved ones, our friends, our family, and it requires that personal introspection and application in order to move forward mindfully in this practice. Throughout the season, we touched upon the role of personal practice in shaping not only our own lives, but the shape of the communities that we live in. We discussed with various guests the fact that personal foresight isn't just a tool for career planning, for example, but can be an act of self-liberation. By envisioning the futures we want to live in, we're giving ourselves permission to dream and to act towards better futures. Whether we're thinking about our personal growth or the futures we want to live in, foresight allows us to map out pathways to align the future with values and aspirations that we hold dear and that is held dear in our various communities. This is an aspect of foresight that I am personally, and that pun is intended, deeply interested in. This season reminded us that foresight isn't only a tool for collective empowerment, but also of individual empowerment and reflection too. And that with imagination being a cornerstone of futures work, it's imperative that we imagine what our lives look like in that better future in order for that future to be realized. A third underlying theme from this season was that of community. So we have the individual that we just talked about in the prior underlying theme, and then we have the community. Nataljia Vojno spoke to the power of community towards just causes. In episode 2, Natalia, peace innovator, reminded us, for example, that peace building is not just about resolving conflict, but creating equitable access to resources like water. She shared a personal story about the power of community diplomacy, where youth were leading dialogues about environmental justice. Natalia also highlighted how engaging young people in peace building and governance is key to creating resilient futures. Her story about youth leading environmental dialogues in the Balkans was a clear reminder of how essential young voices are in shaping resilient futures. We're not just talking about future leaders when we're talking about the youth. Youth are also today's leaders. In the meantime, though, Alicia reminded us that we need to be mindful not to place that unfair burden on youth to fix all of the issues that are existing today. We all are part of this community together. We have to fix things together. Each of our guests emphasized the importance of including our entire community, including those marginalized communities in decision-making processes, and the importance that we must actively co-create as a community in order to resolve conflicts and protect our environment and society. In the meantime, Sabrina from episode 5 reminded us that we must not just think of marginalized voices or youth in our community, but also our more than human kin. Ultimately, this season reminded us that while youth leadership, for example, is a critical component of building resilient and peaceful futures, mutual aid and community care are fundamental practices for social change. And we also need to ensure that we're engaging in mindful, meaningful community engagement to foster lasting peace. Ultimately, we should always be asking who has the seat at the table and who else needs to be there. The fourth and final underlying theme of this season was that of rethinking conventional approaches. And foresight itself is sometimes thought of as an unconventional approach to strategic thinking. I'm happy to hear that it's becoming more widespread and more mainstream, but it only makes sense that an unconventional form of strategic planning also encourages folks to be unconventional in their way of thinking in order to ensure that we have the most inclusive, decolonized practices available to us. So whether you're thinking of conventional approaches to design and research, as Sabrina from episode 5 suggested, or to leadership and nonprofit structures, as Jenn mentioned in episode 6, a key theme in this season was how to think outside of the box. This also helps us to examine the way existing paradigms have shaped our institutions, and serves as an invitation for us to create futures that are grounded in collective care and relationality. Some of my favorite insights from this season include considering how things may be changed when people and organizations are no longer driven by scarcity mindsets or impossible metrics, but instead by ideas of abundance and care and creativity, harkening back to our first key finding of this season. One of the many things that Jenn said that stood out for me personally was this idea that we have the power to reimagine what things look like. Our practices don't have to be about authority or competition. It can be about care. And in a world that often feels like it's going crazy, a world that's too violent or too extreme, or that pits so many of us against each other, anchoring into care can sometimes seem like a radical thought. And the fact that that's a radical thought is a radical thought in and of itself, but I think that's a whole other episode. Ultimately, each of our guests this season served as inspiration for engaging in liberatory practices that create more equitable futures for all. Each of our guests presented examples of how to live, work, and play in unconventional ways. Whether it was how to present and engage with media in a new way, how to engage with research and design in a new way, or how to approach imagination, creativity, care, and abundance in organizational settings in a new way. Each of our guests were inspirations and glimpses into how to live this life just a little bit differently, glimpses into what the future might look like and what it could be. To sum up, this season really reinforced 4 key through lines. First, that foresight is a tool for creative transformation and is most effective when it is engaged in with a spirit of imagination and play. So go out there and play. Second, futures work can and should be deeply personal in order to affect positive change in community. How can we expect the community to change if we're not changing ourselves? It's important for us to do that work too, in order to do that positive work outside ourselves. Third, community is a cornerstone of effective futures work, including meaningful engagement. Futures includes all of us, the young and the old, and all our many diverse backgrounds and cultures and abilities. Finally, last but certainly not least, number 4, it's time to rethink the conventional. How do we think outside the box? If you had a blue sky and anything and everything were possible, what would you do? That's the first question. Next, how are we going to do that? Ultimately, if you take one thing away from this first season of Futures Hub, we hope that you take away the lesson that the future is not a singular, distant entity. It is shaped by our collective actions, the stories we tell, and the care we bring to our communities today. Whether through liberatory design, climate justice, or peace building, we've learned that creating equitable futures requires imagination, collaboration, and a commitment to rethinking our systems. So that leads us to this question once again. How will you contribute to these futures? How will you co-create the world you want to see? You have the opportunity to define what that future or futures looks like. So let's do it, and let's do it together. As we look ahead to Season 2, I'm excited to continue exploring how we can co-create just futures. In Season 2, we'll be diving into new conversations about how we reimagine the world, governance, and more. I hope you'll continue to join us as we continue this journey. We're also accepting any guest speakers, so if you are or if you know of anyone who is active in the future space and would like to reach a wider audience, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this journey. This first season garnered over 200 listeners, and I can't wait to see where we go next. That's 200 folks that are learning how to co-create the future together. Before you go, we'd love to hear what resonated with you the most from today's episode. Send us your thoughts or leave a review. Your feedback helps us bring more impactful conversations your way. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Stay connected with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Futures Hub. Share your thoughts, insights, and suggest topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. Looking forward to catching you next year. Until then, have a good one.